Hey guys, tonight we are holding the ship against the storm. A sword is for one hand, but an anchor is for the ocean. We are joining the medieval anchor smith. We are going to weld massive bundles of iron into a hook that can stop 50 tons of wood and wind. This is a story about weight, friction, and security. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Now, hear the roar of the bellows, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The harbour forge sits at the edge of the world. The stone floor is black. The walls are black. The ceiling beams are black with 200 years of smoke and scale. Outside, the tide pulls and pushes. Inside, the ground shakes. The forge is built on wooden pilings driven deep into the mud, and when the hammers fall, the whole structure trembles. You can feel it in your chest. You can feel it in your teeth. The harbour forge does not whisper. It roars. The smell is salt and coal and iron. The salt comes from the sea, carried on the wind, coating everything with a fine white crust that never goes away. The coal comes from the fire, burning hot and clean, turning the air thick and heavy. The iron comes from the metal itself, heating and cooling, oxidizing and flaking, filling your lungs with the taste of rust and heat. This is the smell of making. This is the smell of weight becoming shape. In the center of the forge, on a bed of fire brick, lies the beginning of the anchor. It is not yet an anchor. It is pieces. It is possibility. It is iron waiting to be joined. The shank alone will be 15 feet long and 8 inches thick. The arms will spread another 12 feet. The fluke, the point that bites into the seabed, will weigh as much as a man. When it is finished, this anchor will hold a merchant ship against the storm. It will dig into sand and mud and rock. It will bear the tension of rope as thick as your thigh. It will not break. It cannot break. A broken anchor means a lost ship, and a lost ship means drowned men and wasted cargo and ruin. So the anchor smith does not hurry. The anchor smith does not guess. The anchor smith works with rhythm and heat and the weight of the hammer, and when the work is done, the anchor will be one solid piece of iron, forged and welded and beaten into unity. But first, there is the problem of the iron itself. We do not have one giant piece of iron. Iron does not come from the earth in 15-foot lengths. Iron comes in fragments. Iron comes in scraps. Iron comes in bars and rods and broken pieces of old things. To make an anchor, you must gather iron. You must collect it. You must bundle it. You must transform many pieces into one. The anchor smith walks through the scrap yard. His boots sink into the mud. The scrap yard is a maze of metal, rusting and weathering, waiting to be reborn. There are broken tools here. There are bent nails and shattered wagon fittings. There are old hinges from barn doors, chain links that cracked under load, plow blades worn too thin to cut the earth. There are pieces of armor, dented and useless. There are sword blades snapped in combat, too damaged to reforge into weapons, but still good iron, still strong iron, still iron that can be melted and welded and made into something new. The anchor smith selects carefully. He looks for wrought iron, iron that has been worked before, iron that has been heated and hammered and folded. Wrought iron is fibrous. It has grain like wood. It has texture. It is strong in tension, resistant to cracking, ideal for an anchor that will bear sudden shocks and constant strain. He avoids cast iron, which is brittle. He avoids iron that is pitted with rust holes, iron that has been burned too many times, iron that has become weak and grainy. He picks up each piece, weighs it in his hand, examines it, and either adds it to the pile or tosses it back into the mud. The pile grows slowly. 100 pounds of scrap, 200, 500. The shank of the anchor will require nearly 1,000 pounds of iron, all welded together into a single mass. It will take days to gather this much. It will take weeks to process it. But there is no shortcut. There is no easier way. To make an anchor, you must start with iron. But scrap iron is not enough. Scrap iron is old iron, recycled iron, iron that has already lived one life. For the core of the anchor, for the heart of the shank, the smith wants fresh iron. He wants bog iron. He wants swamp iron. He wants iron that comes directly from the earth, smelted and bloomed and still holding the strength of the ground itself. Swamp iron is found in the marshes and wetlands around the harbor. It forms naturally, deposited by groundwater, precipitating out of solution as nodules and layers of ore. It is not rich ore, not like the deep mines of the mountains, but it is accessible. A man with a shovel and a strong back can dig swamp iron. A furnace can smelt it. A bloom can be forged. The anchor smith sends his apprentices into the marsh. They go out at low tide, when the mud flats are exposed and the water is shallow. They carry shovels and baskets and long iron probes. They push the probes down into the mud, feeling for the hard lumps of ore beneath the surface. When they find a deposit, they dig. The mud is thick and black and smells of decay. It clings to their legs. It sucks at their boots. But they dig, and they fill their baskets with chunks of brown and orange ore, heavy and wet, streaked with clay and sand. They bring the ore back to the forge in cartloads. They dump it onto the drying racks, spreading it out in the sun and wind. It takes days for the ore to dry, for the moisture to evaporate, for the chunks to become light enough to load into the furnace. And while the ore dries, the smith prepares the smelting hearth. The smelting hearth is smaller than the main forge, but it burns just as hot. It is a clay-lined pit, filled with charcoal, fed by a bellows that forces air up through the fuel. The smith loads the dried ore into the hearth, layering it with more charcoal, building a stack that will burn for hours. Then he lights the fire. The charcoal catches quickly. The flames rise, yellow and orange at first, then shifting to blue as the temperature climbs. The bellows pump, steady and rhythmic, pushing air into the base of the fire. The charcoal glows white. The ore begins to change. The heat drives off the moisture, then the impurities. Sulfur burns away as acrid smoke. Silica melts and drips down, forming slag that pools at the bottom of the hearth. And the iron, the pure metallic iron, softens and agglomerates, forming a spongy mass called a bloom. The bloom is not solid iron. It is a mixture of iron and slag, porous and irregular, weighing perhaps 20 or 30 pounds. But it is real iron, iron that has never been used before, iron that is strong and clean and ready to be worked. The smith pulls the bloom from the hearth with long tongs, still glowing red, still dripping slag, and carries it to the anvil. He begins to hammer the bloom. Each strike compresses the spongy mass, squeezing out the slag, densifying the iron. Molten slag runs out in bright streams, spattering on the floor. The bloom flattens, spreads, takes on a rough rectangular shape. The smith reheats it, hammers it again, folds it, hammers it more. Slowly, through repeated heating and hammering, the bloom becomes a bar. A solid bar of wrought iron, 12 inches long and 2 inches square, clean and dense and strong. It takes a full day to produce one bar from the bloom. It takes a week to produce enough bars for the anchor. But this is good iron, trustworthy iron, iron that will form the core of the shank and give the anchor its integrity. The smith stacks the bars carefully, wrapping them in old cloth to prevent rust, setting them aside until he has gathered all the iron he needs. Now comes the bundling. The scrap iron and the bloom iron must be assembled into a faggot, a bundle that can be heated and welded together. The smith lays out the iron on the floor of the forge, arranging it like a puzzle. The bloom bars go in the center, forming the core. Around them, he places the scrap iron, the old bars and rods and pieces, fitting them together to form a rough, rectangular mass. The goal is to create a bundle that is dense and tight, with as little airspace as possible, because airspaces mean weak spots, and weak spots mean failure. The smith strikers help with the assembly. There are 6 of them, young men with broad shoulders and scarred hands, men who have spent years swinging sledgehammers and learning the rhythm of the forge. They move the heavy pieces of iron into place, following the smith's directions, adjusting and readjusting until the bundle is balanced and stable. When the iron is arranged, the smith begins to bind it. He uses iron wire, thick and strong, wrapping it around the bundle in tight loops. He starts at one end and works his way to the other, pulling the wire as tight as he can, compressing the iron pieces together. The wire bites into the metal, holding everything in place. When one length of wire runs out, he twists on another, continuing the binding without gaps. The bundle must be secure. It must hold together when it is lifted, when it is carried, when it is thrust into the fire. If the bundle comes apart in the fire, the pieces will fall into the coals, and the work will be ruined. The finished faggot is a dense brick of iron, 3 feet long, 8 inches wide, 8 inches thick. It weighs nearly 200 pounds. It takes 2 men to lift it. This is the raw material for the first section of the shank. The smith will make 4 more faggots like this, each one a building block, each one to be welded onto the growing length of the anchor's spine. But before welding can happen, there must be fire. Not a small fire. Not a fire for heating a horseshoe or a knife blade. A fire big enough to bring 200 pounds of iron to welding heat. A fire big enough to walk into. The main forge hearth is 10 feet long and 4 feet wide. It is lined with fire brick, special refractory brick that can withstand temperatures that would melt ordinary stone. The floor of the hearth is a bed of charcoal, 2 feet deep, glowing and ready. The charcoal is not wood charcoal. It is coke, coal that has been baked to drive off the volatile gases, leaving pure carbon that burns hotter and cleaner than any wood. The coke glows with a white heat, shimmering in the air, radiating warmth that can be felt from across the room. Above the hearth, suspended from iron chains, hangs the bellows. This is not a hand bellows. This is not a device that one man can operate with his arm. The bellows of the harbor forge is a machine. It is a massive leather lung, reinforced with wooden ribs, 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. When it expands, it draws in air through valves in the top. When it contracts, it forces that air down through a clay pipe and into the base of the fire, feeding the coals with a blast of oxygen that makes them raw. The bellows is operated by a treadle, a wooden lever connected to the bellows by a system of ropes and pulleys. One of the strikers stands on the treadle, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, pumping the bellows in a steady rhythm. Down, and the bellows contracts, forcing air into the fire. Up, and the bellows expands, sucking in fresh air. Down, up, a rhythm that never stops, a rhythm that matches the heartbeat of the forge. The smith checks the fire. He peers into the glowing coals, judging the temperature by the color. Yellow means hot. Orange means hotter. White means welding heat, the temperature at which iron becomes plastic, at which 2 pieces of iron can be pressed together and will fuse into one. He nods to the striker on the bellows. Faster. Hotter. The striker increases his pace, and the fire responds, the glow intensifying, the heat rising. The other strikers lift the faggot with long tongs. The tongs are custom-made for this work, with jaws wide enough to grip the bundle securely. It takes 2 men, one on each side, to manage the weight. They carry the faggot to the hearth and lower it into the coals. The bundle settles into the fire, disappearing into the white glow. The heat surrounds it, penetrates it, begins to work its way into the iron. Heating the faggot takes time. The surface heats quickly, turning red within minutes, but the core remains cold. The heat must soak in, must diffuse through the mass of iron, must bring every piece, every layer to the same temperature. If the surface is at welding heat but the core is still cold, the weld will fail. The outside will fuse, but the inside will remain separate, and the anchor will be weak. The smith watches the faggot in the fire. He watches the color change. Red to orange, orange to yellow, yellow to white. He watches for the signs of welding heat. The surface of the iron begins to sparkle, tiny bright flashes appearing and disappearing like stars in the glow. This is scale forming and burning off, oxides fluxing and melting. When the sparkling is strong and steady, when the entire bundle glows with the same white light, the iron is ready. The smith calls out. The strikers move. Two men pull the faggot from the fire, gripping it with the tongs, lifting it clear of the coals. Sparks rain down. The heat is overwhelming. Even standing several feet away, you can feel it on your face, a radiant pressure that makes your skin prickle and your eyes water. The strikers carry the glowing bundle to the anvil, a massive block of iron set on a wooden stump, and they lay the bundle down on the flat surface. The anvil rings when the bundle touches it, a deep metallic note that echoes through the forge. The smith takes his position at the anvil. He holds a smaller hammer, a hand hammer, and he taps the bundle, testing it, feeling the resistance. The iron is soft, almost paste-like. It yields to the lightest touch. This is welding heat. This is the moment. The strikers take their positions around the anvil, 3 on each side, 6 in total, each man holding a sledgehammer. The hammers are heavy, 12 pounds of iron on the end of a 4-foot handle. It takes strength to swing a sledgehammer. It takes endurance to swing it all day. But the strikers are strong, and they are trained, and they know the rhythm. The smith raises his hand hammer. He brings it down on the bundle, a light tap, a signal, and the strikers swing. Boom! The first striker's hammer falls on the left side of the bundle, a heavy blow that compresses the glowing iron. Before the hammer even bounces back, the second striker swings, his hammer falling on the right side. Then the third, then the fourth, then the fifth, then the sixth. Each hammer falls in sequence, left, right, left, right, left, right, a rhythm that is faster than thought, faster than reaction, a rhythm that is learned in the muscles and the bones. Boom, 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 boom. The hammers fall like a drumbeat. The anvil rings. The iron compresses. Each blow squeezes the pieces together, forcing out the air, forcing out the slag, welding the separate pieces into a unified mass. The surface of the bundle changes with each strike. The wire bindings break and fall away. The individual pieces begin to blur together. The faggot, which started as a collection of separate bars and scraps, begins to become a single thing. The smith taps with his hand hammer, directing the strikers. He taps the left side, and the strikers on the left hit harder. He taps the right side, and the strikers on the right respond. He taps the center, and all 6 hammers converge on the same spot, driving down in unison, a massive blow that makes the entire forge shake. The heat radiates from the glowing iron. Sweat pours down the strikers' faces. Their shirts are soaked. Their arms ache. But they do not stop. They cannot stop. The iron must be worked while it is hot. If it cools too much, it will become hard, resistant to the hammer, and the weld will not take. So they swing, and they swing, and they swing, and the rhythm never falters. Boom, 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 boom. Sparks fly with each blow, bright orange sparks, fragments of scale and slag exploding outward in showers. They land on the floor, on the striker's clothes, on the smith's leather apron. Some are still glowing when they hit the ground. Some burn tiny holes in fabric, but no one stops to brush them away. The work continues. The hammers fall. The iron compresses. The bundle is flattening now, spreading under the force of the blows. It is no longer a rough rectangular brick. It is becoming a bar, a thick iron bar, still glowing white, still plastic and workable. The smith judges the shape, the thickness, the uniformity. He taps a signal, and the strikers adjust their aim, concentrating on the thicker sections, evening out the profile. The color of the iron begins to shift, white to yellow, yellow to orange. The heat is bleeding away, radiating into the air, conducted into the anvil, lost with every spark that flies. The iron is cooling. The smith sees this. He calls out, and the strikers redouble their efforts, swinging faster, hitting harder, trying to do as much work as possible before the iron cools too far. Boom, 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 boom. But there is a limit. The iron passes from orange to red. Red means it is still hot, but it is no longer welding heat. It is no longer plastic enough to weld. The smith raises his hand, and the hammers stop. The sudden silence is jarring. The ringing of the anvil fades. The only sound is the roar of the fire and the heavy breathing of the strikers. The smith examines the bar. It is not finished. It is not fully welded. There are still visible lines, seams where the individual pieces have been pressed together but not yet fused. The iron must go back into the fire. It must be reheated. The process must be repeated again and again until every seam has been welded shut, until the bar is uniform and solid from end to end. The strikers lift the bar with the tongs and carry it back to the hearth. They push it deep into the coals, burying it in the white-hot coke. The bellows continue to pump. The fire continues to burn, and the iron begins to heat again. This is the rhythm of forge welding. Heat, hammer, reheat, hammer. Each cycle brings the iron closer to unity. Each cycle compresses the layers tighter together. The first heat welds the surface. The second heat welds the layers beneath. The third heat penetrates deeper still. It can take 10 heats, 20 heats to fully weld a faggot of this size. It can take hours, but there is no rushing. There is no shortcut. The iron demands patience. The iron demands rhythm. The iron demands the weight of the hammer, applied again and again and again, until the work is done. The second heat is ready. The bundle glows white again, sparkling with the signs of welding temperature. The strikers pull it from the fire and lay it on the anvil. The smith taps his signal. The hammers fall. Boom, 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 boom. The rhythm is hypnotic. It is relentless. It is the heartbeat of the forge, the pulse of making. Each blow is the same. Each blow is different. The angle changes. The force changes. The target changes. But the rhythm remains constant, a steady beat that drives the work forward. The bar is growing longer. With each heat, it stretches under the hammers, the iron flowing like thick honey, extending in the direction of the blows. The smith rotates the bar, turning it on the anvil, working all four sides equally. The bar must be straight. It must be uniform. Any twist, any bend, any variation in thickness will be a weakness. The third heat, the fourth heat, the fifth heat. The iron glows white, is hammered, cools to red, returns to the fire. The strikers work in a kind of trance, their movements automatic, their minds empty of everything except the rhythm. Swing, strike, recover. Swing, strike, recover. The hammer becomes an extension of the arm. The arm becomes an extension of the will. The will is focused entirely on the iron, on making it straight, making it strong, making it one. The smith moves around the anvil, observing from every angle. He looks for flaws. He looks for cold shuts, areas where the iron has folded over on itself without welding, creating a hidden crack. He looks for laminations, layers that have not fully fused. He looks for scale trapped between the layers, oxides that will create weak spots. His eye is trained. He can see things that others cannot. He can see the grain of the iron, the texture, the subtle variations that indicate whether the weld is sound or not. When he sees a flaw, he marks it with a piece of chalk, a quick line on the surface of the iron. On the next heat, the strikers will concentrate on that spot, hammering it harder longer, until the flaw is worked out or welded shut. Nothing is left to chance. Every inch of the bar is scrutinized. Every seam is tested. The anchor will bear the weight of a ship. It cannot have flaws. The sixth heat, the seventh heat, the eighth heat. The bar is nearly 3 feet long now, and it is beginning to look like the shank of an anchor. It is thick and straight and solid. The seams are disappearing. The individual pieces of iron are no longer visible. The faggot has become a bar. The many have become one. But the welding is not finished. The surface is sound, but the core must also be tested. The smith takes a chisel and a light hammer. He makes a small cut on the edge of the bar, a nick about a 1/4 inch deep. Then he heats the bar again, just in that one spot, bringing it to a bright yellow heat. He takes a pair of tongs and bends the bar slightly, opening the cut, allowing him to see inside. He peers at the exposed edge. In a good weld, the interior should look like the exterior, uniform and cohesive, with no visible boundaries between the original pieces. In a bad weld, there will be lines, gaps, pockets of slag. The smith looks closely. He sees uniformity. He sees solid iron. The weld is good. He heats the bar again and hammers the test cut closed, welding it shut, erasing the evidence of his inspection. The bar is approved. The first section of the shank is complete. But one section is not enough. The shank of the anchor must be 15 feet long. This bar is only 3 feet. 4 more faggots must be prepared. 4 more welding sessions must be completed. And then the sections must be welded together, end to end, building the shank in stages, adding length until the full dimension is achieved. The smith and his team begin the process again. Another faggot is assembled, iron pieces arranged and bound with wire. Another heat is built up in the forge. Another cycle of heating and hammering begins. The rhythm continues. The work continues. There is no end in sight, only the next heat, the next blow, the next increment of progress. The second faggot goes into the fire. The coals glow white. The bellows pump their steady rhythm. The bundle heats slowly, the color rising from black to red to orange to yellow to white. The sparkling appears. The smith nods. The strikers pull the bundle from the fire. Boom, 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 boom. The hammers fall. The iron compresses. The sparks fly. The sweat pours. The second bar takes shape, identical to the first 3 feet of solid wrought iron, welded and forged and tested. It is laid alongside the first bar, and the smith examines them together, checking that they match, that they are the same thickness, the same width, the same quality. The third faggot, the fourth faggot, the fifth faggot. Each one is heated and hammered. Each one is transformed from a bundle of scraps into a unified bar. The work is repetitive, but it is not monotonous. Each faggot is different. Each one has its own personality, its own challenges. One faggot might have a stubborn seam that takes extra heating to weld. Another might have a piece of scrap that is harder than the rest, requiring more hammer blows to integrate. The smith adapts to each one, adjusting his technique, directing the strikers, solving problems as they arise. Days pass. The forge operates from dawn to dusk. The fire never goes completely cold. At night, the coals are banked, covered with ash to hold the heat, so that in the morning the fire can be quickly revived. The strikers take turns on the bellows, rotating through the positions so that no one man is exhausted. They eat at the forge, quick meals of bread and cheese and beer, standing up, still wearing their leather aprons, still feeling the heat on their faces. The 5 bars are complete. They lie on the floor of the forge, arranged in a line end to end, showing the full length of the anchor shank. 15 feet of iron, nearly 1,000 pounds. But they are still 5 separate pieces. They must become one. Welding the bars together is different from welding the faggots. The ends of 2 bars must be brought to welding heat simultaneously, then pressed together and hammered. If one end is hotter than the other, the weld will be weak. If the ends are not perfectly aligned, the shank will have a bend. The smith must control the fire precisely, positioning the ends of both bars in the hottest part of the coals, monitoring the temperature, pulling them at exactly the right moment. The first 2 bars are positioned in the forge, end to end, with their ends overlapping slightly in the center of the fire. The bellows pump. The heat builds. The ends begin to glow. Red, orange, yellow, white. The smith watches both ends, comparing their color, adjusting the position of the bars to ensure even heating. When both ends are sparkling with welding heat, he calls out. The strikers move. 4 men lift the first bar, 4 men lift the second bar. They carry them to the anvil and press the glowing ends together. The smith taps his signal. The hammers fall, not in the usual rhythm, but in a concentrated barrage, all 6 hammers striking the joint, one after another as fast as possible. The goal is to upset the joint, to compress it, to squeeze the two ends together so tightly that they fuse. Boom, 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 boom. The ends compress. The iron bulges slightly around the joint, thickening as the metal is displaced. The smith watches the weld form, sees the two pieces beginning to merge. But the color is fading. The iron is cooling. Not enough. The weld is not complete. Back to the fire. The bars go back into the forge, the joint positioned in the hottest coals. Another heat. Another round of hammering. Slowly, carefully, the weld takes hold. The joint becomes solid. The smith tests it, bending the joined bars slightly, listening for any sound of cracking, feeling for any give. The weld holds. The first two bars are now 6 feet of continuous iron. The third bar is positioned against the end of the joined pair. The same process repeats. Heat, press, hammer, heat again, hammer again. The weld forms. 9 feet of iron. Then the fourth bar, 12 feet. Then the fifth bar, 15 feet. The shank is complete, one continuous piece of wrought iron, forged from hundreds of pieces of scrap and swamp iron, welded together through heat and hammer and the rhythm of the strikers. The shank lies on the floor of the forge, still warm, still radiating heat. It is massive, it is impressive, but it is only the beginning. The shank is the spine of the anchor, but it is not yet an anchor. The stock must be forged, the arms must be shaped, the flukes must be added. And all of that work lies ahead in the days and weeks to come. But for now, the smith allows himself a moment of satisfaction. He runs his hand along the length of the shank, feeling the smooth surface, the uniform thickness, the solidity of the weld. This is good iron. This is strong iron. This is iron that will hold a ship against the storm. The strikers lean on their hammers, catching their breath. Their arms are sore, their backs ache, but they are proud. They have done good work. They have taken scattered pieces and made them whole. They have followed the rhythm, trusted the process, and the iron has responded. The shank is proof of that. Outside the forge, the harbor is busy. Ships come and go. Sailors load and unload cargo. Merchants haggle over prices. But none of them see the work that happens in the forge. None of them know the hours of heating and hammering, the sweat and sparks, the careful attention to detail that goes into making an anchor. They see only the finished product, hanging from the bow of a ship, ready to drop when the captain gives the order. But the smith knows. The strikers know. They know what it takes. They know the weight of the hammer and the heat of the fire and the rhythm that drives it all. And they will continue, day after day, heat after heat, blow after blow, until the anchor is complete. The fire burns on. The bellows pump. The rhythm continues. Boom, 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 the sound of making. The sound of iron becoming form. The sound of the harbor forge, where weight becomes security, where many pieces become one, where the work is never finished but always continuing, one heat at a time, one blow at a time, one anchor at a time. The smith looks at the shank one more time, then turns back to the fire. There is more work to do. The stock must be started. Another faggot must be prepared. The iron must be gathered, bundled, heated, and hammered. The rhythm will begin again. The hammers will fall again. And the anchor will grow, section by section, until it is complete. But that work is for tomorrow. For now, the shank is done, and that is enough. The smith banks the fire, covering the coals with ash, preserving the heat for the morning. The strikers put away their tools, hanging the hammers on their hooks, coiling the tongs, sweeping the floor clear of scale and slag. The forge grows quiet. The harbor grows dark. And the shank lies cooling, radiating warmth into the night, a promise of the work yet to come, a testament to the work already done. 15 feet of solid iron, waiting to become an anchor, waiting to hold a ship, waiting to bite into the seabed and refuse to let go. The arms of the anchor are not straight. They cannot be straight. An anchor with straight arms will slide across the seabed, skipping and bouncing, never finding purchase. The arms must curve. They must sweep back from the shank at an angle, 30 degrees or more, so that when the anchor falls, when it lands on the bottom, the curve forces the flukes to turn downward, to bite into the sand or mud or rock. The curve is what makes an anchor work. The curve is what transforms falling iron into holding iron. But forging a curve is not like forging a straight bar. A straight bar can be hammered lengthwise, stretched under the blows, kept true on the anvil. A curve must be shaped gradually, bent incrementally, controlled at every stage. The iron must be heated unevenly, hotter on the inside of the curve than the outside, so that it compresses more on one side and stretches more on the other. The smith must think in 3 dimensions, must visualize the final shape, must work toward it blow by blow, heat by heat. Each arm begins as another faggot, smaller than the ones used for the shank but still substantial. 300 pounds of iron, bundled and bound. The faggot is loaded into the fire, heated to welding temperature, pulled out glowing white. The strikers take their positions. The hammers fall. Boom, 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 boom. The bundle compresses, becomes a bar, rough and thick. But this bar will not stay straight for long. The smith marks the center point, the place where the arm will attach to the shank, and begins to work outward from there. He heats one end of the bar, only one end, leaving the center cool. The hot end glows yellow-white. The cool end remains dark red, almost black by comparison. The smith positions the bar across the anvil with the hot end extending beyond the edge. He nods to the strikers. They swing, but not in the usual rhythm. They strike only the glowing end, hammering it downward, forcing it to bend. The bar curves over the edge of the anvil, the hot iron yielding, the cool iron acting as a hinge. The smith checks the angle with his eye, adjusts the position, signals for more blows. The curve deepens. But bending is not enough. The outer edge of the curve is stretching, becoming thinner. The inner edge is compressing, becoming thicker. The bar is no longer uniform. The smith must correct this. He reheats the bar, this time focusing on the inner curve, bringing it to welding heat. Then he hammers it, not to bend it further, but to compress it, to thicken it, to even out the cross-section. The outer edge is hammered next, stretched deliberately, thin to match the inner edge. Slowly, through repeated heating and hammering, the curve takes shape, and the bar remains strong. The first arm curves through 35 degrees, a smooth arc 6 feet long. The smith lays it on the floor and steps back, examining it from different angles. The curve is even. The thickness is uniform. The surface is clean, free of cracks or cold shuts. He nods. This arm is good. The second arm must match the first exactly. The smith uses the first arm as a template, laying it on the floor and positioning the second bar beside it. He marks the points where the curves should align, scratches in the scale with a sharp tool. Then he heats and bends the second bar, checking it against the first after each heat, adjusting until the two arms are mirror images of each other. Both arms are ready. Now comes the most critical weld of the entire anchor. The arms must be attached to the shank, joined at the point called the crown. The crown is the bottom of the anchor, the vertex where the shank and the arms meet, the joint that bears the full strain when the anchor is set. If the crown weld is weak, the anchor will fail. The arms will tear away from the shank. The ship will drift. Men will drown. So the crown weld must be perfect. It must be stronger than any other part of the anchor. It must be inspected, tested, proven. There can be no doubt, no hesitation, no flaw. The smith prepares the surfaces. He heats the end of the shank and the ends of both arms to welding temperature, then hammers them flat, creating broad surfaces that will bond together. The flattened ends are cleaned meticulously, scraped with wire brushes to remove every trace of scale and slag. Scale is oxide, and oxide will not weld. If there is scale between the surfaces, the weld will be weak, a cold shut waiting to crack under load. The welding flux is prepared. This is a mixture of sand and borax, ground to a fine powder. When the iron is at welding heat, the flux is sprinkled onto the surfaces. The flux melts, becomes liquid glass, and dissolves any remaining oxides. It protects the iron from the air, prevents new scale from forming during the welding process. The flux is essential. Without it, the weld will not take. The shank is positioned in the forge with its bottom end deep in the coals. The two arms are positioned on either side, their ends also buried in the fire. Three pieces of iron, all heating simultaneously, all approaching welding temperature. The smith watches each piece, comparing colors, adjusting positions. The heat must be equal. The timing must be perfect. The bellows pump faster. The fire roars. The iron glows brighter, red to orange to yellow to white. The sparkling appears, dancing across all three surfaces. The smith sprinkles flux onto each piece, and the flux melts instantly, bubbling and spreading. Now, it must be now. The smith calls out. 8 strikers move. 4 men lift the shank, gripping it with long tongs, holding it vertical. 2 men lift the first arm, 2 men lift the second arm. They carry the glowing pieces to the anvil, moving quickly but carefully, trying not to lose heat. The shank is held upright. The first arm is pressed against it, the flattened end tight against the shank's bottom. The second arm is pressed to the other side. The 3 pieces are aligned, the joint formed, the flux bubbling between the surfaces. The smith taps his signal. The hammers fall. All 6 hammers, striking the joint from different angles, compressing the surfaces together. The iron is soft, plastic, welding heat. The surfaces merge. The flux is squeezed out in bright streams. The hammers continue to fall, boom, 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 faster than normal, harder than normal, driving the weld home. The color fades, orange to red. The iron is cooling, not enough time. The weld is started but not finished. The entire assembly, shank and both arms joined but fragile, is lifted and carried back to the fire. It barely fits. The crown joint is positioned in the hottest coals. The bellows pump. The heat builds again. Second heat. The joint glows white. More flux is added. The assembly is pulled from the fire and laid across the anvil. The hammers fall again. The weld deepens. The iron fuses. The joint thickens as metal is displaced, forming a bulge around the crown, extra material that adds strength. Third heat, fourth heat, fifth heat. The process repeats. Each heat penetrates deeper. Each round of hammering compresses the joint tighter. The smith inspects the weld after every heat, looking for signs of weakness, listening to the sound of the hammers, feeling the resistance of the iron. A good weld sounds different from a bad weld. The hammer rings clear on solid iron. It thuds dull on a cold shut. The crown rings clear. The weld is sound, but the smith is not satisfied yet. He takes a chisel and cuts into the edge of the joint, the same test he used on the shank, opening a small gap to inspect the interior. He heats the joint again and pries the cut open with tongs. He peers inside. Solid iron. No lines. No gaps. The weld has penetrated all the way through. He hammers the test cut closed, erasing the inspection mark. The crown is approved. The anchor is beginning to look like an anchor. The shank rises 15 feet, straight and strong. The arms curve away from the bottom, sweeping back at the proper angle, creating the characteristic shape. But the arms end in blunt stubs. They have no flukes. Without flukes, the anchor cannot bite. Without flukes, it is just an iron sculpture, heavy but useless. The flukes must be forged. These are triangular blades, broad and flat, that extend from the ends of the arms. When the anchor lands on the seabed, the flukes are what dig in, what catch on rock or coral, what bury themselves in sand and mud. The flukes are the teeth of the anchor. They must be sharp enough to penetrate, strong enough to hold, and large enough to provide sufficient surface area to resist being pulled free. Each fluke begins as a large lump of iron, a faggot weighing 200 pounds, bundled and bound like the others. But this faggot will not be forged into a bar. It will be flattened, spread out like dough under a rolling pin, transformed from a thick mass into a broad blade. The first fluke faggot goes into the fire. It heats slowly, the mass soaking in the temperature. When it reaches welding heat, it is pulled out and laid on the anvil. The smith positions it carefully, then steps back. He signals to the strikers, but this time he does not tap a rhythm. Instead, he points. Top. The strikers concentrate all their blows on the top of the lump, hammering it flat. The iron spreads, flowing outward under the force. Boom, 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 boom. The lump flattens. It becomes a rough disc, thick in the middle, thinner at the edges. The smith rotates it, presents a different angle to the hammers. More blows. The disc spreads further. It is no longer round. It is becoming triangular, shaped by the direction of the hammer strikes. The iron cools, back to the fire. Another heat, another round of flattening. The disc grows larger, thinner. The smith begins to refine the shape, using his hand hammer to mark where the strikers should strike, directing the flow of the metal. The triangle emerges. The point forms. The base thickens for strength. The edges thin for penetration. Heat after heat, blow after blow, the fluke takes shape. It is a flat triangle, 2 feet long, 18 inches wide at the base, tapering to a point. The thickness is not uniform. The center is nearly an inch thick, providing strength. The edges are half an inch, sharp enough to dig but not so thin they will bend. The point is reinforced, thicker than the edges, because the point will take the most abuse when the anchor strikes the seabed. The fluke is still rough. The surface is covered with hammer marks, small dents and ridges from the blows. The smith smooths these with a lighter hammer, working the surface while the iron is at a lower heat, red instead of white. The hammer marks diminish. The surface becomes more uniform. It will never be perfectly smooth. This is forged iron, not machined steel, but it is smooth enough. Smooth enough to slide through sand. Smooth enough to not catch on itself. The fluke is welded to the end of the first arm. This weld is less critical than the crown, but it is still important. The smith flattens the end of the arm and the base of the fluke, cleans the surfaces, applies flux. The two pieces are heated together, pressed together, hammered together. The weld forms. The fluke becomes part of the arm. The arm becomes part of the shank. The anchor grows. The second fluke is forged the same way. Another lump of iron, heated and flattened, shaped into a triangle, smoothed and welded. The smith matches it to the first fluke, ensuring they are the same size, the same shape, the same weight. An unbalanced anchor will not set properly. It will twist, it will turn, it will refuse to bite. Both flukes must be identical. The anchor now has its shank, its arms, and its flukes. It is recognizable. It looks like the anchors that hang from the bows of ships in the harbor. But it is not yet complete. It cannot be used. An anchor dropped without a stock will fall flat, will land with its flukes parallel to the seabed, will slide uselessly across the bottom. The stock is what turns the anchor, what forces it to orient correctly, what makes it work. The stock is a crossbar, a beam that passes through the top of the shank at right angles to the arms. When the anchor falls, the stock hits the bottom first. It acts as a lever, tipping the shank, forcing the arms and flukes downward. The fluke on the lower arm digs in. The anchor sets. Without the stock, none of this happens. The stock is not made of iron. Iron would work, but it would add too much weight to the top of the anchor, making it difficult to handle, difficult to stow. The stock is made of oak, strong wood that can bear compression and resist splitting. Oak from the heart of a mature tree, oak that has been seasoned for years, dried slowly to prevent cracking. The smith does not make the stock himself. That is the work of the ship's carpenter. But the smith must prepare the iron fittings that hold the stock in place, the bands and bolts that keep it secure. And he must approve the stock, must inspect it, must ensure it meets the requirements. The carpenter brings the stock to the forge. It is a massive timber, 12 feet long, 8 inches square, hewn from a single trunk. The grain is straight. There are no knots, no cracks, no signs of rot or insect damage. The smith examines it, running his hands over the surface, checking for flaws. He finds none. The stock is good. The center of the stock has been mortised, a square hole cut through the middle, sized to fit over the top of the shank. The smith slides the stock onto the shank, checking the fit. It is tight, but not too tight. The stock can be moved with effort but will not slip on its own. This is correct. Iron bands must be forged to reinforce the stock, to prevent it from splitting under the stress of use. The smith heats long bars of iron and bends them into rectangular loops, sized to fit around the stock. 4 bands in total, 2 near each end. The bands are heated to welding temperature and welded closed, forming continuous loops with no weak points. The bands are fitted onto the stock while they are hot, driven down with a sledge, shrinking as they cool, gripping the wood tightly. The smith quenches each band with water, cooling it rapidly, making the contraction more dramatic. The wood compresses slightly under the pressure. The bands bite deep. They will never come loose. A hole is drilled through the shank, just above where the stock sits. An iron pin is forged, a thick rod that passes through the hole and through the stock's mortise, locking everything together. The pin is upset on both ends, mushroomed with a hammer so it cannot be pulled free. The stock is secure. It cannot slide up or down. It cannot rotate. It is fixed in place, ready to do its job. The anchor is nearly complete. Only one element remains: the ring. The great iron ring at the very top of the shank, the point where the anchor cable attaches. This is the ring that bears the full pull of the ship, the ring that must hold against storms and currents and the weight of the anchor itself. This is the jewel of the anchor, the piece that must be perfect, the piece that must never fail. The ring is forged from a single long bar of iron, the best iron available, clean bloom iron with no scrap, no recycled metal, no impurities. The bar is 8 feet long and 3 inches thick, wrought iron with a fine grain, tested and proven. This bar will be bent into a circle and welded to form the ring. The smith heats the entire bar to an even orange heat, then begins to bend it. He works on a large circular form, a wooden disc 6 inches in diameter, mounted on a post. The bar is wrapped around the form, bent gradually, carefully, maintaining an even curve. The bar is too long for a 6-inch ring, and that is intentional. The ends will overlap, creating a scarf joint, a diagonal connection that is stronger than a simple butt weld. The bar is bent into a complete circle with the ends overlapping by 8 inches. The smith marks the angle of the overlap, then removes the bar from the form. He heats the overlapping ends to welding heat, scuffs them, cuts them at matching angles, and cleans the surfaces. Flux is applied. The ends are brought together and welded, hammered while white hot, fused into a seamless join. The ring is tested. The smith hangs it from a chain and strikes it with a hammer. It rings like a bell, a clear, pure note. He looks for cracks, for any sign of weakness in the weld. There are none. The ring is sound. But the ring must do more than hold. It must also rotate. The anchor cable comes from the ship at an angle, and that angle changes as the ship swings with the tide and wind. The ring must be free to turn, to accommodate these changes without twisting the cable. A fixed ring would cause the cable to kink, to weaken, to eventually fail. The top of the shank has been prepared with a thickened section, a boss that is slightly larger in diameter than the rest of the shank. A hole has been punched through this boss, a clean round hole that passes all the way through. The ring will pass through this hole, sitting on the boss like a pendant on a chain. The smith heats the ring and opens it slightly, creating a gap just wide enough to pass over the boss. The ring is slipped onto the shank, positioned on the boss, then heated and hammered closed. The gap is welded shut. The ring is now permanently attached to the shank, but it is free to rotate around the hole to turn as needed. A washer is forged, an iron disc with a hole in the center, and fitted onto the ring above the boss. This washer prevents the ring from sliding up the shank, keeps it positioned correctly. The washer is riveted in place. The ring assembly is complete. The ring turns smoothly, rotating through a full circle without binding, without catching. Perfect. The anchor is finished. All the pieces have been forged, welded, assembled. The shank stands 15 feet tall. The arms curve back at the proper angle. The flukes spread wide, ready to dig. The stock passes through the top, ready to tip the anchor into position. The ring sits at the very top, ready to receive the cable. The anchor weighs nearly 2,000 pounds, a massive piece of iron, black with scale, rough from the hammer, beautiful in its brutal functionality. But the work is not done. The anchor must be proven. It must be tested. A ship's captain will not trust an anchor that has not been proven. The cost is too high. The risk is too great. The anchor must be dropped, must be stressed, must be shown to be strong before it can be sold, before it can go to sea. The proof takes place in the harbour yard, in a large open area paved with stone. A wooden crane stands ready, a tall A-frame with a heavy rope running through a pulley at the top. The anchor is lifted by the crane, hoisted 20 feet into the air, hanging by its ring. The smith inspects the ring under load, looking for any deformation, any bending, any sign of weakness. The ring holds. It does not stretch. It does not bend. The anchor is released. It falls. 2,000 pounds of iron dropping 20 feet, accelerating, building momentum. It strikes the stone pavement with a tremendous crash, a sound like thunder, a sound that echoes across the harbour. The impact is tremendous. The whole yard shakes. Dust rises. The smith walks to the anchor, examining it carefully. The flukes have hit the stone, taken the full force of the impact. He looks for cracks, for splits, for any sign of damage. The flukes are unmarked, not even a dent. The welds are inspected, the crown especially, the point where the arms meet the shank. No cracks, no separation. The welds have held. The anchor is lifted again, dropped again. Another massive impact, another test. Again, the anchor is undamaged. The iron is strong. The welds are strong. The anchor is proven against the shock of falling. But falling is not the only test. The anchor must also resist pulling. A team of oxen is brought to the yard, 6 massive animals harnessed together. The anchor is laid on the ground with one fluke buried in a pit filled with rocks and gravel. The cable is attached to the ring. The oxen are hitched to the cable. The driver calls out. The oxen lean into the harness. The cable goes tight. The tension builds. The oxen strain, their hooves digging into the ground, their muscles bulging. The cable creaks. The anchor does not move. More pressure. The driver calls again. The oxen pull harder. The cable stretches slightly, the hemp fibers elongating under the load. The anchor begins to slide, the fluke dragging through the rocks, but it does not break. The ring does not deform. The shank does not bend. The crown does not crack. The smith strikes the shank with a hammer, a sharp blow, and listens. The anchor rings, a clear metallic note. A cracked anchor would sound dull, dead. This anchor rings like a bell. It is sound. It is strong. It is proven. The anchor is approved. The smith marks it with his stamp, a small symbol punched into the shank, proof of who made it, proof that it has been tested. This stamp is his reputation. If the anchor fails, his name will be tied to that failure. But if it holds, if it saves a ship, if it brings men home safely, his name will be tied to that success. The stamp is both a signature and a promise. The anchor is painted with tar. Hot tar, melted in a cauldron, applied with brushes made of bound straw. The tar seals the iron, protects it from rust, preserves it against the corrosive action of salt water. The tar is applied thick, coating every surface, filling every crevice. The anchor turns black, shiny, dripping with tar. It will be left to dry for several days, the tar hardening into a tough protective shell. When the tar is dry, the anchor is loaded onto a cart. The cart is pulled by horses through the streets of the harbour town. the anchor lying in the bed, massive and heavy, the cart creaking under the weight. People stop to watch. Children point. Everyone knows what an anchor means. An anchor means a ship is ready to sail. An anchor means trade, profit, adventure, risk. An anchor means the difference between coming home and being lost at sea. The cart arrives at the dock where the ship is moored. The ship is a merchant vessel, a wide-beamed cargo carrier built for stability and capacity rather than speed. The crew is busy loading supplies, checking rigging, preparing for departure. The anchor will be the last item loaded, the final piece of equipment before the ship leaves port. The ship's crane swings over the dock. The anchor is lifted, slowly, carefully, the crane groaning under the weight. The anchor rises, swinging slightly, turning in the air. It is guided into position at the bow, lowered onto the anchor bed, secured with chains. The crew inspects it, checking that everything is properly attached, that the cable is secured to the ring, that the anchor is ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. The smith watches from the dock. His work is done. The anchor is no longer his. It belongs to the ship now, to the captain, to the crew. It will travel to places he will never see, will drop into waters he will never sail. It will hold the ship against storms he will never experience. But he knows it will hold. He knows it is strong. He has put everything he has into it, his skill, his knowledge, his rhythm, his care. The anchor will not fail. The ship casts off. The lines are released. The sails are raised. The ship moves away from the dock, out into the harbor, heading for the open sea. The anchor remains on the bow, waiting ready, and the smith turns back to the forge. There is another anchor to make, another faggot to bundle, another fire to build, another rhythm to begin. Boom, boom, boom. The sound carries across the harbor, the sound of the forge, the sound of making, the sound that never stops. As long as there are ships, there will be anchors. As long as there are anchors, there will be smiths. And as long as there are smiths, the rhythm will continue. The ship sails for weeks. It crosses open ocean, carries cargo to distant ports, trades and profits. The weather is good. The wind is favorable. The anchor remains on the bow, unused, waiting. But the crew knows it is there. They know it is ready. That knowledge brings comfort, brings confidence, brings sleep on rough nights. Then comes the storm. A line of dark clouds appears on the horizon. The wind shifts, the waves build. The captain orders the sails reduced, the hatches battened, the cargo secured. The ship rides the growing swells, pitching and rolling but staying on course. The storm grows stronger. The wind howls. The rain comes in sheets, horizontal, blinding. The waves are mountains, valleys, walls of water that crash over the deck. The captain makes the decision. They cannot outrun this storm. They cannot ride it out in open water. They need shelter. There is a bay ahead, a rocky inlet with deep water and good holding ground. They will anchor there, ride out the storm at anchor, wait for the weather to pass. The ship enters the bay. The sails are dropped. The ship slows, drifts, carried by momentum and wind. The captain judges the position, waits for the right moment, then gives the order. Release the anchor. The crew releases the chain. The anchor slides off the bow, falls, disappears into the dark water. The chain follows, rattling through the hawse hole, link after link, fathom after fathom. The anchor falls through the water column, sinking fast, the weight pulling it down. 60 feet, 80 feet, 100 feet. The anchor hits the bottom. The chain goes slack for a moment, then snaps tight as the ship drifts back. The anchor rolls, tips, the stock hitting the bottom first, levering the shank, forcing the flukes downward. One fluke digs into the sand. The chain tightens further. The anchor pulls, slides a few feet, then the fluke bites deeper. The anchor sets. The ship comes to a stop. The chain is tight, angling down into the water, vibrating with tension. The wind pushes the ship. The waves push the ship. The current pushes the ship. But the anchor holds. The fluke is buried deep in the sand. The crown is bearing the load. The ring is distributing the force evenly through the shank. Everything the smith built, every weld he made, every heat he judged, every blow he directed, all of it is working. The storm rages through the night. The wind screams. The waves crash. The ship pitches and rolls, but it does not drift. The anchor holds. The crew sleeps in shifts, exhausted, trusting the anchor, trusting the iron, trusting the smith they never met. Morning comes. The storm passes. The wind calms. The waves subside. The sun breaks through the clouds. The captain orders the anchor raised. The crew begins to wind the capstan, pulling the chain in link by link. The chain tightens. The anchor resists, still buried, still holding, more pressure. The capstan creaks. The anchor breaks free, the fluke pulling out of the sand, the anchor rising through the water. It emerges, dripping, covered with sand and mud and seaweed. The crew rinses it with seawater, inspects it. Not a crack, not a bend. The anchor has done its job. The ship is safe. The crew is safe. The cargo is safe. All because of an anchor, forged in a harbor forge, welded together from scrap iron and swamp iron, hammered into shape by men following a rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. The ship sails on, carrying the anchor, ready to drop it again when needed, ready to trust it again, ready to sleep again knowing it is there. And in the harbor forge, far away, the smith is making another anchor, heating another faggot, directing another team of strikers, following the same rhythm that has existed for centuries, the rhythm of iron and fire and the weight of the hammer. The harbor forge never sleeps. The fire never goes completely cold. There are always ships. There are always storms. There are always anchors to be made. And so the rhythm continues, boom, 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 the sound of security being forged, the sound of weight becoming purpose, the sound of scattered pieces becoming one. And now, as the ship rocks gently on calm seas, as the anchor hangs ready on the bow, as the tar coating gleams in the sunlight, as the iron holds its shape and its strength, we can rest. The work is done. The anchor is made. The ship is safe. The storm has passed. The rhythm fades into the distance, becoming softer, slower, a heartbeat winding down, a pulse settling into sleep. The iron is cool now. The forge is banked. The hammers are silent. And we drift gently, knowing that somewhere an anchor holds. Somewhere iron keeps a promise. Somewhere weight becomes safety. And we can finally, deeply, completely sleep.